So first of all, welcome and thank you very much for being here today. It is an enormous effort because we are going to talk about a very interesting aspect that Shannon mentioned, the Mexican case. Mexico is undergoing a process that implies political continuity, but it is a changing government. The new president is Claudia Sheinbaum. Gerardo, why what is the status, what's your vision about how Mexico came to be what it is, and if it is going to continue in this same roadmap? Thank you for the question. Thank you for the invitation. In effect, the country is undergoing a process of political transition with continuity. As we know, the previous president, López Obrador, the first populist president or left president, and now we have Claudia Sheinbaum. And I believe that she has a lot of challenges ahead in the short term, economic things, tax matter that needs to be solved. We have a deficit in 2024 that should be dealt with. We have some minor financial operational problems with the oil company in Mexico. But in terms related to what we are talking about here, we have two aspects which are important. One is the aspect of the relationship with the U.S. and the TEMEC issue or USMCA that, as you know, we will discuss in 2026, a potential review of the program, and it will depend on the results of the elections in the U.S. I mean, what we will do in the short term. The president has expressed her wish to continue along this road to deepen relationships with the United States, and she has said something very important in the logics that we are discussing here. She will try to leverage the process of nearshoring. And here she wants to implement a series of policies, industrial policies, in order to receive the highest direct foreign investment and bring the private sector to invest in industrial development areas. And in this sense, she wants to provide continuity to the policies of the past with a vision of integration economically with North America. And together with this, she has expressed that she didn't mean to get close to the BRICS group, but deepen the relationship with the U.S. and Canada, with the North. Maximo, with your versatility of being at the front of a company and being represented by important companies, you had the opportunity through the CEO Dialogue, which is an organization that gathers the most important CEOs, of talking with Carla Sheinbaum, candidate and president. What were your impressions? What's your perception or the perception of Mexican president of the industry and private initiative? Thank you. Good morning. And I want to apologize on behalf of Paco Cervantes, who couldn't make it because of the strike. In CAINTRA and in the CEO Dialogue and CCE, we had a lot of meetings. In fact, the president as candidate came 4 times to CAINTRA in a year. We were with her at an event of the CCE no sooner she was elected. And at the CEO Dialogue, we had a lot of dialogue with her. And I believe that the enterprise sector in Mexico after this dialogue was very optimistic. It's true, as Gerardo said, that this is a model or a party that continues, but there is a change of administration, and I believe that the president has quite a clear idea, at least at an industrial economic level, of where she wants to go towards. We need to reinforce the TEMEC, the North American region, attract investments, she said. How to attract investments? She speaks about competitiveness through infrastructure. We were saying that Latin America lacked infrastructure, and it's true. in railway stations, in border connections, the need for a power grid in transmission and distributions, which is a bottleneck in Mexico today, and how we want to focus on renewable energy or renewable power. She speaks about technical education, about how to strengthen enormously technical education to offer more possibilities to all the youth in Mexico. She speaks about an important change for SMEs and the industries on how we simplify and digitalize the processes of tariffs, of taxes in Mexico, and she has thought about a secretariat to work on this. She wants a plan with the ideology of a government that's more towards the left. I want shared prosperity where the axis is how do we raise the standards of living of the people and their salaries through industrialization. She sets it clear through a clear industrial policy, integrating North America and replacing the $200 billion that Mexico brings from Asia, basically China, and the $400 million that U.S. brings from China. So all this, if Carolina, you've been there, but during the last Alaceros, you have heard me say this, that this was required. This is exactly what the President of Mexico stated at this fora. So there is a clear coincidence here with her. The great challenge is how do we execute all this? How do we implement all this? Gerardo, another challenge as well is how do we continue if we consider this hypothesis that Shannon was talking about, which is that the tension between the U.S. and China, and this is a topic that covers everything, may grow over time. So far, Mexico, in this reindustrialization process, was able to, through fine syntony or fine-tuning, it could move forward. But it's also affected by this conflict, and Mexico has a very important role in the world, and in terms of being the most important partner of the U.S. We've exceeded China as the most important commercial partner. The imports Mexico to the U.S. have increased enormously during the last year, especially during the conflict with China, when the free trade agreement or NAFTA agreement was put in place. When China entered the World Trade Organization, it got stagnated, but now it's growing. And Mexico is on this road. It will depend on what happens in the U.S. and the policies they both adopt. But Mexico wants to keep on collaborating with the North American region and the rest of Latin America. In Mexico, there is that vision of global participation, regional participation, and I believe that regardless of who wins, the situation is going to be complex towards the year 2026. There is a revision from the TEMEC, and this revision is not a renegotiation. This is if we want to do adjustments, and probably they will discuss there the possibility of Mexico adopting some policies similar to the U.S. Not that drastic, but there is that possibility regarding the products from China. Mexico, and Máximo knows this, Mexico has been or has had an open policy towards the rest of the world, but has been selective recently in placing some additional tariffs on some areas of the Zero because they perceived that they could enter steel from China. So tariffs on steel, sorry. So in this sense, the country is in this difficult situation in the middle of a commercial dispute where it is not the main actor, but it is also an important player or actor. It is adopting a policy, and the signals they've sent are to prefer a stronger interaction in several industrial sectors with North America and the rest of Latin America. Let me remind you that you can send questions through the QR code. Máximo, you as president and leader of chambers, I'm quite interested in this. You were saying that you are on a commission devoted to SMEs. Considering your experience, how can we integrate the value chains better and more? There are many ways, and I believe that Mexico is a country in Latin America that performed the best job at that. No doubt there needs to be a public policy. The governments need to understand that integrating the value chain, including the SMEs in this chain, is important from the point of view of economic growth, not only in Mexico, but in other countries, since they amount to 7 out of 10 jobs created. They are very strong. How? Through public policies, saying that we need to add more value. This is something I forgot to say about the president. She said that Mexican production needs to have an added value. Mexico exports $600 billion in American dollars, but with a content of less than 20%, with an added value of less than 20%. And this is, if we attack this aspect and we add value or generate value, that's the way to integrate SMEs. But we can do some other things. For example, we have more than 4,000 SMEs as partners of CAINTRA, and an active policy on how do we foster the incorporation of these companies to the SMEs within their value chains. There are events where they mingle, there are value chains, and then in the public policy, how do we come up with proposals for the government? We simplify all the tax issue, all the tax submission issues for SMEs in Mexico, which is something that the Mexican Tax Bureau is analyzing. And there is another one on how to finance for productive investment of the SMEs, like the Development Bank that today in Mexico and some time ago has not been financing the SME development. How can we, with the guarantee of larger companies, foster development of SMEs? The government is looking into this in how can we spur this value chain. Gerardo, this appeared in the presentation of Sharon, but I heard it yesterday as well, is the importance of development of infrastructure. Could you once again double-click on that? And what was your experience and which lessons were learned in these regards? Well, infrastructure is a key aspect for the development of an economy in general, and specifically for the industrial development. Let's remember how Mexico started and why Mexico became the most industrial country of the region. It happened in the midst of a crisis. Mexico changed dramatically as of 1985 in the middle of an economic crisis that led to the fall of oil prices. Mexico exported between 80-85% of its exports that were oil. Today, manufacturing exports amount to more than 90% of exports. It's been a radical transformation, and this happened within a crisis context. Mexico took the decision of opening up the economy and following a series of policies that I believe were clear as to where they wanted to go to, and consistency. Mexico has changed party in the 3 last occasions. They went from the PRI, with whom they signed the Free Trade Agreement of North America. Then they went to PAC. Then the PRI went back. And all of them have followed a consistent policy to integrate productive chains and invest in the development of integration. And this involves infrastructure. As Máximo said, we want to strengthen that. The border traffic, the high roads or highways. We are talking about a new railway towards the north of the country. And we want to continue developing the industrial poles we have in the country. We want to integrate the productive chains and increase the involvement and value adding. And today there is a vision which coincides with the most modern vision of industrial policy, and this was set by Shannon. We've had experiences in the past with the industrial policy in Latin America, but now a clearer vision on how to move forwards in this direction, not only with the intervention of the state, not necessarily picking winners, but facilitating the industry development in a more organic manner. And the first thing that Latin American countries should do is guarantee macroeconomic stability. I believe that this is very important in Argentina. For example, we are recovering, and this is an important issue, because without macroeconomic stability, we cannot make decisions for the private sector and move forward in the industrial sector. Therefore, macroeconomic resistance with a clarity of where we want to aim for, what do we want to do, the coherence in policy and consistency are the recommendations that could be followed by Latin American countries in order to sort of increase reindustrialization. Nearshoring has an important geographical component. It does not only depend on the geographical component, but also on other elements. There's an article which is very interesting that talks about how different countries of South America have conditions that could benefit them from the nearshoring. This is an integrated process where all the region could be benefited because we characterize ourselves by having stability or relative stability, socially, economically, compared to other regions. Máximo, considering your personal experience also with the representation of the chambers, what would be the lessons of the Mexican case? Thinking as well about talking to enterprise leadership, because some things are up to public policies and other things have to do with gaining protagonism here.
Oh, that's an excellent but very long question. And, I cannot answer that with a specialist sitting next to me. There are several factors, I think. First, I think that Mexico took a long time. And this pathway did not start with the war with China or the North American Free Trade Agreement. It sort of started when Mexico said that all the economy secretaries I have met, they used to say the best industrial policy is the non-existing policy, but they've been working with an industrial policy since 1987. I think they have realized that industrial development was the key to achieve economic development, and that's something that every Latin American country should do. I think yesterday Rafael or Ricardo showed a graph, the importance of industrial employment in Brazil. Salaries which are 30 or 40% higher, but we don't discuss this in Argentina. Yeah, in Mexico they do. So for the last 30, 40 years, they have known that industrial employment is better quality employment than employment in services, for instance. So gradually, they have encouraged industrial development. I think that's key. Secondly, this is important. They are very near the States. They are lucky to be just on the other side of the border. But, I don't agree with Ricardo, what he said, that this is the main factor. No. Mexico chased development. They decided to change the economy. They decided to stop exporting oil, and I'm going to develop my industry. That's what Mexico said. And also, there are other factors. Mexico saw an opportunity, and they were competing with China. So, what has happened with China is that they disindustrialized all of Latin America except for Mexico, because they took notice of this, and they chased policies to defend the industry, to give certain incentives since the moment in 21 when China exceeded the World Trade Organization. They've increased industrial production with a GDP 15%. So you see this huge transfer of added value from many regions to one in particular. And Mexico, I think, was the only Latin American country who understood this clearly, and they decided to strengthen their relationship with the U.S. and to implement public policies to defend the industrial sector. The country which defends trade the most, the country which has been most actively chasing investments, which tries to defend the region at large. The main player in this sense. Gerardo, Máximo? Okay, we have lots and lots of questions. We should create a streaming channel, Well, so I will start with a very simple question. Yeah, this is for Gerardo. This is, an important question. What do you think? Is there a risk posed by foreign investments given the legal reform in Mexico? Well, this judicial reform has started. It is important, relevant. I'm simplifying my answer. For your information, this reform seeks to elect judges through popular vote, judges, magistrates. You can imagine a very deep reform. There is a risk, though. There is a chance, I have to say it, that the judiciary might lose some independence, some autonomy in the country. There are still certain institutions which guarantee and secure stability in the country, an autonomous central bank, a fiscal policy that is very responsible. Yeah, Mexico has a manageable debt below 50%. So you see some structural conditions and good macroeconomic factors. So everything is robust, I would say. And the reform, I personally don't think this is the right solution, but I don't think either that it will endanger the arrival of investments, because we have many more mechanisms to guarantee investments, to attract investments, because the decisions will be good. There are arbitrage mechanisms. Companies can resort to these mechanisms. In general, for some sectors, this might sound an additional risk, but in my own personal opinion, this will not bring about a significant change. Or, the perception that this country is attractive will not change. Certain institutions, the location, the geographic location, free trade agreements in Mexico, and something which has not been mentioned. In this industrialization process, something key has been education, training. Mexico has an educational system which creates top quality labor. Businesses know this. Many engineers graduate from our universities. One of the countries, fathering the highest number of engineers. So, you see, these factors make up the potential risks posed by this legal reform. But this does there is no risk that this will corrode the industrialization of the country. We have spoken about industrialization, the virtuous relationship with the US, nearshoring. But the question is, what do you think? What will happen with the relationship with the rest of the world and Latin America and regional trade? I think we have touched upon this. The president was very clear. Her priority is to strengthen the relationship with the US. But she said, with integration with Latin America, of course, I think there are opportunities or more opportunities to develop the entire of the Americas. And I think this stance is being adopted by the US. Senators from both parties agree, and they are saying that this war with China, and I agree with what has been said here, this will escalate no matter who wins the election, by having more allies, having a more localized, a more American supply chain. But it's important, but this will depend on the countries. Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. Countries have to be willing to join this value chain, to join this game. Because what's going to happen if a country says, I want to trade more with China and with the US? I think that's going to be impossible. The US will not accept it. Thank you so much for joining us. A big round of applause.